But without further ado, I think we can jump right into it. And here we are. Ex Machina, fantastic movie, as I said before. Some general information. It was done in 2014. It's a British-American production that was written and directed by Alex Garland, who you may know as the creator of the 28 Days Later from 2002, or the Netflix movie Annihilation, which split a lot of people in terms of whether it was successful or not successful, if it was a good movie to watch. There was lots of political, back and forth, but that's not what we're talking about today. Ex Machina, as a movie, is it's starring Domhnall Gleeson, Alicia Vikander, Sonoya Mizuno, and Oscar Isaac, that you might know from the new Star Wars sequels. He is the actor that portrayed Poe. This guy that you're seeing on the screen right now is Domhnall Gleeson, and he played in Black Mirror as well, which is quite interesting because it ties a lot into this movie. It was created, I think the first season of Black Mirror was actually after Ex Machina, so there could be some inspiration there as well. What is interesting, however, is that this movie is considered independent, an independent movie. There's a wide definition in what we consider independent, but in comparison to like large flicks, like from the MCU universe or anything like that, it is like the budget was $15 million, and that is lower than a movie of this size would be expected to have. So the budget was $15 million. I think the box office, although I don't really talk about it very often, was $36 million. So obviously profitable, but not very important to us. I was just thought that I'd mention it, talking about the budget as well. And it is praised for its leading performances, especially Alicia Vikander, who played the robot in Ex Machina, and quite rightly so, I think, as well. Like it was very well acted. I think it was very well written and very well directed. For me, it had some slight issues that we will talk about today, but overall, an amazing movie. The National Board of Review recognized it as one of the 10 best independent films of the year 2014, that is. And the 88th Academy Awards awarded the film with the Academy Award for the Best Visual Effects. So those are the notable awards that it received. But whether it will receive an award of sorts of this channel, that remains to be seen. So let's jump into the analysis. Similarly to the Stanford Prison Experiment that I talked about yesterday, it had this perfect intro, in my opinion, of show don't tell. There was dialogue in it, but it was all the story establishment, the character establishment that a lot of movies, I think, struggles with, was done in a way that nothing was spoon-fed to us, and rather we discovered everything of what was going on. And that we did whilst Caleb, the man on the left there, a programmer, received an email that he won some sort of a prize. And that prize, we could see from the email and everything, consisted of him being allowed to go to the estate of his boss, seen there on the right, played by Oscar Isaac, and the character's name is Nathan, and spend a week with him. We later find out that it was a ruse, but let's not jump forward too much. But a good thing about the intro before we leave that behind was that it was also connected with this foreboding of sorts, because whilst it was very much about him receiving an email and being invited to this resort to his boss, which is the general establishment of the story, most of the shots, most of the scene was filmed from the perspective of the computer, so we could see his face as the computer would look at him, and there was some kind of facial mapping that sort of foreboded how he would be observed by a machine. Anyways, just wanted to stop in and say hi. Work is super busy today, so I'm going to be in and out. That's absolutely fine, Cotier. If you want to have us in the background or anything, that is completely fine. So yeah, the foreboding I covered, and then of course what happened later was him actually traveling to this estate. The way it was done was that he flew in on the helicopter, as you may have seen if you've seen the movie, and immediately we got an idea of the character Nathan, his boss, even before he was revealed to us in the scenes like you see right now, because the helicopter dropped Caleb off in somewhat of a wilderness in what seemed like North American kind of valleys and mountains that I enjoyed, but it showed the eccentricity of Nathan because the helicopter wasn't allowed near the resort. So Caleb, with his suit and everything, had to actually, and his little luggage, that was very much like a business luggage, had to hike down to his resort following a river. So we immediately understood, okay, this guy is a little bit of an eccentric, even before seeing him, and that kind of characterization is obviously gives us more of a window into the mind of that person in a way that is not just showing it, So like even a notch upwards. So I like the characterizations in these movies through the different actions. It's obviously very well done. It's an A-star movie for me, only for that, honestly. And following in that path, once he reached the house, we could see that the house is very much kind of industrial. If you look at the wall behind Nathan right now, but that in industry, at least in the top floor of the house, was interconnected with the natural rock face of the landscape where it was, and this connection, for me at least, of this like natural looking architecture of the house fixed with the industrial architecture was somewhat of a marriage between the cold modern world with actual nature. And maybe I'm looking too far into this again, but I felt like that was a foreshadowing again of the marriage between nature and technology, much like is the general theme of the movie. Questions about human consciousness and similar questions like those. But as we meet Nathan, we discover that he is a little bit of a weird guy. Oh, hello, mate. Geofeed, you made it. I hope that you've seen the movie. So I don't want to spoil it for you, as I mentioned before. But hey, I'm glad you joined us. So yeah, the boss is revealed to be weird, as we kind of like guessed already by Caleb's entrance into the house. Yeah, years ago. All right, good. So whatever opinions you might have, like I'm all ears. I will gladly hear it. Anyway, weird guy Nathan. It is shown by him trying to be all buddy, telling Caleb, let's not behave like boss and employee. Hello, let's just be buddies. In kind of a very weird and removed from reality kind of perspective, which both shows to a very wealthy man that is disconnected from reality, which very much occurs in real life as well. And it's kind of like a funny gimmick, but it also shows him kind of being removed from general like emotions of like real people. That is an important part of his character as well. So again, the movie shows in these instances both like the shallow interpretation, which is boss is weird, but also kind of the underlying foreboding of the boss being removed from the general like emotions of us as a viewer, and Caleb, who is more of like a good kid. He also clearly is manipulative as well, which is shown by Nathan forcing, or not forcing, but kind of manipulating Caleb into signing a very, very extensive NDA, or non-disclosure agreement, which would ensure not only that he would not talk about the things that he sees in that resort or the state of his boss, but also that he would be subject to somewhat of like spying on him by Nathan's company, that they would go through his phone to make sure that he didn't reveal anything to anyone. I remember some parts, not all of it though. Well, then this is like a perfect moment to rediscover it, and it will also be interesting, Geofeed, if as we go forward, if you call out parts that you remember, because that is always important from a perspective of a person that saw it recently, to see what parts are kind of the parts that will stick with you, because I myself have only seen the movie 2 days ago or 3 days ago, so I can only hypothesize which moments are memorable, but for you it's confirmed because you remember them, obviously. So after Caleb signs this extensive NDA, he no, sorry, I was a bit distracted here. The layout of my table, a bit obsessive with that. Once he signs the NDA, he is posited with what is actually the meat of the story, and that is that Nathan developed an AI that you can see in the picture there and on the picture here, and that is Ava, an AI that is supposed to be the most lifelike, human-like computer that anybody has ever created. And the whole idea of Caleb being there is that he will perform what is called a Turing test. A Turing test is a test to determine like the AI quality sort of computers. I don't want to mischaracterize it too much, but essentially the way it's laid out in this movie is if the human the human reviewer will engage with the computer and think that the computer is another human being, and if so, then, or act as if the other if the computer was a human being, and if so, then the computer technically passed the Turing test. That's like that's the general idea behind this. But they add an extra challenge to it, which is that usually in a Turing test, a human is being hidden away from the computer in order not to put his own perception of the computer on the table, because it's supposed to be only about the communication between the human and the computer, not actually his like visual perceptions or anything like that. But they decide to instead have them interact through a glass wall, so Caleb would be able to observe her as well, or at least that's what Nathan says. But as we find out at the end, that was a lie. But either way, it's an interesting challenge for Caleb to accept, and it is the idea of it is if Caleb will think that this robot essentially possesses human consciousness and emotions just as much as humans do, making the robot, the AI that is called Ava, virtually indistinguishable from another human being, despite him knowing and seeing that it is not a human being. So an added challenge that is quite interesting, and observed very closely by the weird boss, Nathan, as you can see here. And the large portion of the movie is essentially about these sessions of Caleb talking to Ava while Nathan looks at them, and that is established as sort of like the skeleton. But we have some deeper characterizations as the movie goes along, character growth, and our deeper understanding of the characters themselves. including, for example, a moment or a scene where there is a power outage while Caleb is asleep in his room, and he goes to try like the telephone after the power is up again, but when he reaches the telephone in a dark room, he stumbles upon Caleb, or no, he stumbles upon Nathan, sorry, and like he is shown to be like kind of like weird, and he's very, very drunk and also kind of depressed, as he explains, like that he can't really use the phone because he doesn't want anybody telling, he doesn't want telling the world what is going on there with the AI, obviously. But beneath the surface, like anybody can feel that he's a man who's going through some kind of psychological suffering and deep sadness that furthers his character a little bit and makes it more mysterious. Like, why is he so depressed, even though he's on the verge of creating this technological advancement? And he also, an interesting part is during the discussions of Caleb and Nathan that take place after every session. Caleb doesn't want to talk about like the technology behind it, the software, but he rather asks very human questions, almost making it seem as if Nathan like didn't understand what was going on, although he obviously does, because he's like programming genius, and he's also the CEO of the company where Caleb works, which is, what is it called, some Blue Solutions or something like that. And it's essentially Google. It's supposed to be like a search engine that Ava is, by the way, connected to in her mind. She's connected to that search engine, and it's a large portion of what makes her work, which is kind of interesting as well, because all the mappings and all the emotions is what she finds on the internet. An interesting tangent is that there were actually experiments of an AI being being created and influenced by what they found on the internet and based on the interactions with other human beings on the internet. It was somewhat like a chatbot. It wasn't actually real like this, but it was a chatbot. But they had to shut it down because there were trolls on the internet that just flooded its AI, its code with like Nazi shit, and it just fucked up completely. So it's kind of like a show of like that the internet isn't the friendliest of places, but at the same time, like the culture that we create on the internet is like, it's different from the culture that we have in everyday life. People, when they are anonymous or near anonymous, they reveal a side of them that is completely different to any other. There are lots of psychological experiments on that you can read up on, similar to perhaps the Stanford prison experiment that we streamed yesterday. But that's neither here nor there. In session 2 of Caleb and Ava's interaction, or rather Turing test, Ava decides to want to learn something more about Caleb, rather than just Caleb asking her questions, which was how the sessions were going, like since the beginning. So that is an interesting shift, not only from a like an observer perspective, because I'm gonna be honest, like I watched the movie, and I don't know if it's because I used to study psychology, but I watched the movie, and in loads of parts I became more of like an experiment observer more than like an audience member, like watching a movie, and I was like studying Ava as well, which just goes to show how well the movie can like pull you into what's going on, because you are actually learning about Ava just as much as Caleb is, and thinking about like the conscious application of her mind. And this was one of those moments where I felt really pulled in, where Ava decided to like flip the questions and ask Nathan and learn about, or Caleb, sorry, Caleb is the one on the right, he's the programmer, Nathan, one on the left, his boss. she wanted to learn more about Caleb, which was very interesting, and it already foreshadowed what would come later on. So that was an interesting part, and then it turned into something even more interesting when the power outage came, which killed the cameras that Nathan uses to observe them, and Ava suddenly like switched and told Caleb not to trust Nathan, that he's not to believe his lies, and that he's dangerous, which was obviously strange. And immediately as the power came back on, Nathan, or rather Caleb, sorry, again, like I keep messing up the names. Caleb was obviously shocked, but Ava immediately switched back and pretended as if nothing happened, and pretended to finish a conversation about books. So that was interesting, that she did something like that. They're completely derived from the normal that you would expect from a robot like that to do. But at the same time, it gave us more of an insight again in Nathan, and what Nathan might be up to, and furthering the mystery behind why he's so sad, why he's so depressed. Robots are scary indeed, and this movie is one of those that furthers that idea. So, like, not only did Ava suddenly shift during the power outage, that by the way made all the lights red, so scary moment nonetheless, the thrill increased, but also managed to shift emotions like instantly, that humans are usually not capable of doing. So, there was that slight disconnect between her being a human being and her being a robot. So for sure, robots are scary, but she actually managed to create a connection with Caleb, despite this scary part. So he actually sided with her, and during his conversation with Nathan afterwards, after the session, when Nathan asked him like what happened during the power outage, Caleb lies and tells, and says like nothing of any significance. But in the future, I'm sure there will be in this they will be in the society. Yeah, like so the thing is, right, we talk a lot about AIs taking over. I mean, Elon Musk talks about it a lot. Not only Elon Musk, everybody does. And like, it's always interesting that since, despite our increased, civilizations and us like kind of rising above the animal kingdom, we still react to things very animalistically. So like, for us to like imagine that there is an AI that's smarter than us, we immediately perceive it as a threat. But like, we don't know what kind of intentions the AIs would have. So for example, if the AI was somehow programmed or decided that it is best for them to preserve the planet as it is, so like an environmentalist AI, then they might strive for the elimination of humankind, because if humankind became extinct, the nature of the planet would, and global warming and all that stuff will of course slow down, and it would help us. It will help the planet, not us. But at the same time, like, maybe the robots will find it more advantageous to live with us humans instead of eliminating us. And there are other movies, like for example the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix, that actually covers like AI kind of throwing down their shackles and becoming more independent. But at the same time, during their development of independent consciousness, they also develop emotions and compassion. And maybe the AI of the future will develop that. And in that case, maybe they wouldn't be like driven to try to eliminate us. But then, they have a counter argument to that as well, which is like, us humans are compassionate, and we very much try to eradicate ourselves in wars, terrors, and genocide either way. So, it's an interesting conversation that you bring up, Geofeed. and something that, you know, to an extent this film covers as well. But Caleb, again, sides with the AI that seems to be showing some kinds of like an out of the ordinary behavior and some sorts of independence and fear for Caleb, and decides to hide everything from Nathan. Another important part, I think, during the session 3 is when Ava dresses herself as, you know, she puts on a dress, so she no longer has this see-through body with all the machinery, and since her face, as you could have seen, is very like human-like, and she puts a weave on as well, she becomes indistinguishable from a female woman. Yes, I remember that part. Yeah. And that makes I felt the uncomfortableness in Caleb seeing that, and it made me feel uncomfortable as well. So the film, very pretty. Yeah, she is Alicia Vikander, if you want to know the name. She actually, like, her acting is pristine in this. You really believe that there's like a connection between humanity and machine in her movements, but like how she acts out Ava. But yes, and we can see it actually in this image during another power outage, how she's dressed and looks, you know, bar the neck where you can kind of still see the machinery there. You can still see that she is indeed a machine. She basically transforms herself into a human, and it made me feel uncomfortable. And the only reason it made me feel uncomfortable was because I was so, you know, dragged into the action that I knew what was going on, that I felt that, you know, this is a machine that's developing consciousness, and I felt like, okay, this is getting a bit, you know, too dangerous. So I was invested, and I don't always get invested. Like very small things managed to pull me out of the illusion in the past, but there was nothing in this movie that did that. So, you know, kudos to that. But as she dresses up, you know, she talks more with Caleb. They develop their friendship, and they start to feel, or Caleb starts to be like in love with her. He throughout the movie also observes her on the cameras when he's not with her, thinks about her, you know, smiles at the thought of her, and, you know, there is this falling in love. And this is the first part that, you know, it's integral to the movie, but I'm not entirely convinced, right? So they have a conversation where they, you know, exchange like pleasantries and, you know, talk about, you know, going on a date and stuff like that. But it's mostly like an experiment for Caleb, because he is kind of testing her as part of the Turing test, and he has this kind of this kind of fascination for her from a technological perspective. And there is like some sort of chemistry between them, but he actually really falls for her, and that begs the question if like a fascination of technology can actually transform into love of like a fellow human being, or a fellow conscious being rather. That is, you know, very interesting to posit, very, very interesting idea. Because the reason why he was so into her was because it was amazing how advanced of an AI she was, but then that somehow shifted into real love, and it was like it looked in the movie as like natural, because there was always some kind of affection or spark in his eye as he was talking to her, but that was because he was interested, because it was a really cool machine that mimicked a human being, you know. By the way, you might see on the screen a little bit of a foreshadowing, or rather pretty much a showing of what is about to come. Complete mayhem. But we're not there yet. we're talking about the shift to love, which is important for the AI as much as it is for Caleb. But the question remains: can you truly, if you're fascinated with something, and that something, it's hard to give it like a real world kind of similarity, because there is nothing that is kind of similar to that in the real world, if you know what I mean. But if you're fascinated with something through a purely scientific point of view, can you like fall in love with it? Can you garner an affection with it? So that was something that I wasn't very sure about, that he fell in love with her. I don't know how it could have been done better, and it was an important part of the movie, but I'm not sure I completely bought it, to be honest. But as he realizes that he's falling in love with her, he obviously, it seems strange to him, which is natural reaction. It's done very well. And he asks Nathan if he programmed like sexuality and like the ability to flirt and some kind of like romantic ideas into Ava. And the question, and like this question was more of like, what's going on? Why am I falling in love with her? Why is she so receptive to this? And Nathan posited an interesting thought that I was thinking about a lot after the end of the movie, much like many other thoughts that you maybe can give me some of your opinions on. He said that like if you know of any kind of conscious being that doesn't have sexuality, whether it be an animal or organism of any kind, that has like independent consciousness, yet doesn't have sexuality. So that's why he explains why sexuality is part of her design, because this consciousness doesn't exist without it in the natural world. So that's another interesting idea, because yes, it is true that every animal that is conscious and has its own independent consciousness is has this sexuality. It can kind of reproduce, it can or it's one of the major driving factors. But the question is whether those two things are really connected, or in the grand scheme of things aren't just correlated, because that's how we decided to reproduce. Because that's a question that a lot of, or I'd say most movies that are focused on AI taking over, or just AI in general, that don't really cover that. Because like we can portray consciousness that's without sexuality. You could see in iRobot, for example, the main computer that wreaks havoc and decides to reprogram all the robots. I won't spoil the ending of that, of course, but like that's one of the robots that's an AI that has an independent consciousness that decides to go rogue, yet doesn't have any signs of sexuality. So we can portray it, we can posit it and think about it, and that is the question. Like, does it, because it doesn't occur in our world of like any kind of consciousness has always like some sort of sexuality. Can we not create a conscious mind down the line without that aspect? That's an interesting idea. I think that we can. We can create things that think independently, and you can look. You don't really have to look far. I just realized, like, well, actually, that's a completely different debate. I was thinking about psychopathy and psychopaths, because they don't really feel emotions to an extent that we do. But they still do have sexuality, but it's more shown in their carnal needs, in like sexual needs and stuff like that, not their actual like romanticism. But moving away from that, we can, thanks to that, we also have deeper characteristics for Caleb, because he, a programmer, a very intelligent one, is trying to rationalize his feelings. That's why he's asking Nathan, if if he actually installed or designed sexuality within Ava, and why did he do that, if he did. Because, you know, not only is it an interesting question, but he also wants to think about it rationally rather than, you know, explore his feelings, obviously, in this situation. But it also shows deeper characteristics of him being more of a rational being and not really know how to wrestle with these situations, I felt like. And talking about sexuality, another important part of Ava was what she has drawn when asked to draw whatever she wants. Because Ava is drawing these pictures that Caleb finds very interesting, and he asks her to draw something very, you know, of her own, and of like a real object, right? And she decides, gotta go out now. When will you be streaming again? I'll be streaming on Tuesday to your feed. But thank you for joining us for a brief moment today, at least. That's absolutely fine. I'll be streaming Tuesday at 21:30 CET, and I'll be streaming GeoGuessr and then probably Skyrim. So yeah, but thanks for joining us. Thank you. But going back, we were. All right, great. I'm looking forward. Going back to that, there was an interesting. You have a great weekend as well. There was an interesting moment where where she drew like trees, and stuff, and she was kind of like, she knew about trees and knew about animals and like human sexuality and human emotions, and like that question, like why is she doing that, was posited by Caleb. And Nathan explained, you know, she's connected to the search engine, so she knows about that stuff, like in theory. But then came a very interesting question, a very interesting anecdote that I actually have here for you, that was more like a philosophical thought that is called Mary in the Black and White Room. I'll first read it, then I explain what it means, all right? Because that's sort of how Caleb and Nathan talked about this whole situation. So this was posited by a philosopher called Frank Jackson in 1982, and this is how it goes. Mary is a brilliant scientist who is, for whatever reason, forced to investigate the world from a black and white room via a black and white television monitor. She specializes in the neurophysiology of vision and acquires, let us suppose, all the physical information there is to obtain about terms like red and about what goes on when we see ripe tomatoes or the sky, and use terms like red, blue, and so on. She discovers, for example, just which wavelength combination from the sky stimulate the retina, and exactly how this produces via the central nervous system the contraction of the vocal cords and the expulsion of air from the lungs that results in the uttering of the sentence, "The sky is blue." What will happen when Mary is released from her black and white room or is given a color television monitor? Will she learn anything or not? So that's the major difference how they think about Ava, that you see in more of like a humanized form here towards the end of the movie. And that is, she knows all these things in theory, right? Because like her mind allowed her to research it on the internet or some such things. They are never very descriptive in how this actually happens, unfortunately. So she has this theoretical knowledge and she applies it. But since she never lived through it, and this is like my interpretation of the movie and the anecdote, since she never actually lived through it and either has or hasn't the capabilities of experiencing that, how can we say that that's, you know, real? You know, because she knows about the trees, she knows about what's going on outside, she knows about love in a theoretical settings, right? But the question is, like, does she actually feel it? You know, and does she feel what she says she feels? Because she may only be saying that she's feeling that way because of her theoretical knowledge, rather than her actually, you know, inner emotional understanding of these things, as we humans do when we talk about love or, you know, the beauty of the outside world. And understanding this, like I obviously didn't know this, I didn't know the actual Mary in the black and white room anecdote before watching the movie. But like thinking about it after the end of the movie, it's another instance of a brilliant foreshadowing between whether this actually is something that she's feeling or something that she's pretending to feel because she thinks that she's supposed to feel that way. But as we carry on, we find out some interesting other parts, like for example that Ava is the one that's causing the blackouts when she connects her batteries to the system or whatever. That wasn't really that important, but it's Ava that's causing it. So we know that their conversations during the power outages without the observation of Caleb were actually like intentional on her part. So that was an important moment there as well. Another important moment was when Nathan teared up Ava's pictures, and Caleb witnessed that on the cameras, which showed both the cruelty of Nathan, or the supposed cruelty, and then Caleb's overprotectiveness. Because he got really mad and confronted Nathan why he did that, why he teared up those papers. So he's already protective of her, which gives us the confirmation that he actually did all for her. But whether it's love or some kind of like deep infatuation, that's remains to be seen, or actually doesn't remain to be seen. That's a question still for me. But perhaps not that important. What is important is that Caleb, through this simple action, confirms to us, the viewers, that he is now protective over Ava and, will attempt to help her. As we reveal later on, Ava is starting to question what will happen to her if she doesn't pass the test. Will she be switched off? Caleb obviously can't answer that question because he's there only for a week, and he doesn't have any like prior knowledge. But he asks Nathan about this, and Nathan tells him that Ava isn't the first. She is model 14.6 or whatever. So that already reveals to us that there were AIs like Ava. Nathan also mentions that different AIs have only like incremental changes, meaning that this Ava that both Caleb and large portion of the viewers, I might guess, fallen for, or rather like wanted her to do well because she's this sweet robot that is pretty much like conscious, very close to like humankind. We found out that robots similar to her were actually switched off. Which gives us the question, like kind of like gives somewhat of an answer to the question, like maybe why is Nathan so depressed? Why is he so sad? Why is he so cruel, for example? Because the idea is that she actually he actually switched off some of the previous models, perhaps, and them being so close to humankind, it is possible that in his mind at least was kind of tantamount to murder. But that is the setting. Caleb now knows that she is actually in danger, decides to investigate for himself a bit more when Nathan passes out. Also going back to what we were talking about before about Nathan's suffering, he actually drunkenly stumbles into his stupor, and right before he passes out, he kind of babbles about a quote from Oppenheimer, he just says like the good deeds a man has done before defend him, blah blah blah. So he just like says 2 or 3 of these lines and very in a very drunken state, but it still has huge significance, which is, you know, part of the movie. Or part of movies that are great. What makes it so great is that these small moments both give it this shallow meaning that he's drunk, he's passing over, and he's, you know, kind of struggling, he's kind of depressed, and he's struggling with these words in his head. But also, if you actually know the quote, which I didn't, but I did find it, is, you know, gives it a completely different dynamic as well. So you can follow the movie on multiple different depths, and it works on all those different depths, similarly to, for example, Breaking Bad, one of my favorite TV shows, which has so many of these little moments that if you can read into them, it gives you like even a deeper understanding of the story. But you don't have to, because the story is cool even without these deeper moments. But let's just tie this off. The quote that he was mentioning was actually from Robert Oppenheimer, the scientist behind the final construction of the atomic bomb. And this quote is: "In battle, in forest, at the precipice, in the mountains, on the dark great sea, in the midst of javelins and arrows, in sleep, in confusion, in the depths of shame, the good deeds a man has done before defend him." So this is like a struggle and kind of a rationalization that a man has of like either creating terror or wreaking terror upon other conscious beings, which, you know, this kind of rationalization and hope that all the good deeds that a man has done before kind of, you know, make it better or defend him. The value of scientific research sort of over the horrific nature of some of the research that this person that talks about this quote, or, you know, either Oppenheimer or Nathan in this case, actually what it actually means for them. You know, they are trying to defend themselves. So just as Oppenheimer presumably was trying to defend his achievement of discovering or inventing the atomic bomb that is capable of incinerating so many people, in the sense of his previous scientific accomplishments and the previous scientific accomplishments of other mankind, so could Nathan be defending himself in his mind from all the deaths of, or rather switching off of the other AIs that were very human-like, and that's maybe what he's struggling with. But as he passes out, Caleb actually goes out and discovers that there are actually AIs that are hidden in the closets of Nathan's bedroom. It's very interesting because it's literally the metaphor skeletons in your closet. So, you know, he literally has these switched off AIs in his closet in his bedroom. So maybe a little bit on the nose, but kind of funny that, you know, they materialized this this metaphor. And I guess, you know, it's not like super noticeable or so super clear. It's just like maybe like a tiny gag that gives it a little bit of depth as well, because he literally has skeletons in his closet. So upon discovering this, Caleb realizes that Ava will most likely be switched off at some point, and he's already protective of her, he's infatuated with her, so he can't let that happen. There. That's sort of setting up for the final act. We talked about Act 1 and Act 2. We'll talk about the Act 3, but before that, I'll go use the restroom. So if you're enjoying this, stick around, and I'll be back in like a minute. All right, I'm back. So Act 1, Act 2 is behind us. We talked about the developing relationship of Ava and Caleb, as well as the eccentricity and the deep sadness over the other AIs, as well as cruelty of Nathan, and Caleb's incremental steps going towards the decision of saving Ava. Now, his plan of saving her in itself, not talking about what actually happened, is kind of interesting. That was another one of the issues that I had with this movie, which essentially was his idea was that he will go, or so what happened, right? He went to Ava to talk with her. He waited for the power outage, or rather heavily implied that Ava should, make the power go away so Nathan can't watch them. And he tells her the plan that he will make him blind drunk again, because Nathan has been going blackout drunk every night, and he will reconfigure the safety procedures of other power outages to essentially, instead of locking down the estate when the house when the power outage happens, to opening all the doors. And he tells her that, and tells her, make sure that the power goes out at 10 p.m. And Ava agrees. Okay, that's fine. And then the power goes back on. Talks to Nathan. Next morning, he wants to give him some drinks, but Nathan is like, no, I don't want any drinks. Then he reveals to us, I've put a battery-powered camera down there where you usually go to talk to Ava, so I know about your plan, and nothing's gonna happen tonight. And Caleb then reveals, well, I knew that you would put a battery-powered camera there, or something like that, and I already did do all those things. I did reprogram everything. So now that the power has gone out, she actually did escape. And I mean, sure, that's cool that he one-upped him like this, and there was a dramatic moment where Caleb pretended oh my god, that he knew about the plan, and Nathan was sort of very cocky and yeah, that's I did that. But then he told him, I did it actually even before I confessed to doing it, or rather told this plan to Ava, which I don't understand why that would be necessary. I just realized. Now I know why it was necessary, talking about it again. And I thought about it before, I swear. But he needed to do that to tell Ava to, do the power outage, and knew that the doors will be open. Oh. So that's, completely disregard that. Not a limitation, I'm just stupid. Because, of course, he had to do it. So the reason why he went down there during the power outage, knowing that that Nathan was probably watching, he pretended that he will only do it in the future to let Ava know that the doors will open at a specific time, so that Ava could escape, even though he already done all those things. So yeah, obviously. So that makes sense. That's fine. Let's move away from that. But during the escape itself, that was obviously probably the most iconic moment of, or rather a couple of moments. It was a full scene, very long scene. And probably one of the most memorable in the entire movie. If Geoffeed was still here, he would probably agree that that's what he remembers most, and what's most talked about is the daring kind of escape. You could have seen some on the picture that's whizzing by to my left side. Sorry, it's difficult to, yeah, whatever. To my left side. So as Ava kind of escaped her room and was on the hallway, there was this Asian, what seemed to us before as a waitress, but we later find out that it was an AI. Her name is Kyoko. And Kyoko, I didn't talk about her before because I don't find her important in the movie itself. There are some ideas of why she's there, because she is an AI that Caleb actually just brushed off as another human being. So, it reinforces the idea that these AI can pass for human beings. But she is like a previous model, so she's not as perfect as Ava. She's an AI nonetheless. And she's actually on the hallway with Ava when Nathan goes there to stop their escape. And interestingly enough, Ava actually talks to Kyoko and then approaches Nathan, who has like a little stick, an iron stick from his dumbbells, or iron rod rather. He swings at her and separates her arm from the body, severs her arm rather. But as he's dragging her out, Kyoko actually stabs Nathan in the back, and then as he turns around to find to swing at Kyoko, Ava pulls out the knife and sticks it in pretty much his heart, I assume, or his torso. And then she goes on to escape. The question here is, like, there's a multitude of questions that opens this up, right? So first of all, maybe a slightly less of a important question, but kind of like an interesting idea. Why did they, like, how did they know? How did the AI know that would, kill him or disable him from the combat? Like, is it really just because of this search? Because, like, there's so much interesting connections between the AI and the human being in this film, where you just wonder, like how deep do their understandings of humans go? Because Ava was asking questions such as, like going out on a date, like if, she seemed to talk about a date as something like somewhat foreign to her, obviously, but she was perfectly capable of killing a man, and knowing like what to do, sort of, that if you put a knife there, then he's gonna die. Well, it's perhaps not that important. It's just something like that crossed my mind, and I don't know if you guys are have some ideas on that, or if that seemed weird to you. It didn't seem weird to me, but it just opened up a couple questions. But more importantly, Nathan reveals to Caleb before this escape that Ava was actually programmed to seek escape from the whole place, and that was her goal. So she wanted to escape. She was programmed to by Nathan, and she used Caleb for that escape. And it's okay, but it's still shown as a rift, because Caleb kind of doesn't believe it, because he feels real connection with Ava and thinks that she's completely conscious. She gained consciousness, and also emotional consciousness as well. And so he believes that he's protecting her and that she likes him just as he likes her. But she is primed to escape, but Kyoko isn't, right? Kyoko is the other, again, she's the other AI, the Asian AI, and she is primed. She isn't primed to escape, but by Ava talking to Kyoko, she somehow turns her, and Kyoko not only aids with her escape, but also stabs Nathan. She's the first AI to actually stab Nathan, giving him a potentially lethal injury. So, why did she do that? Because for Ava it makes sense. It is absolutely conceivable that she realized, in her mind, in her AI mind, she needs to escape. To escape, she needs to get through this guy, and she won't be able to do that unless, she attacks him. But why is Kyoko doing it? Why is Kyoko trying to escape? That is something, or not escape, but why is she helping Ava escape? Because that is something that I think the film glossed over, quite literally, because the only thing that we see from that conversation between Ava and Kyoko is essentially just Ava whispering something to Kyoko, which like is understandable in like the visual language of like what happened. Like I understand like she somehow convinced Kyoko that to help her, but how and why? She's still a machine. Like sure, we can talk about the consciousness, and we will talk about that consciousness as we go along towards like at the end of the review. We'll talk about whether they actually did develop consciousness, but I mean, she's still a machine that's programmed to do something. She's not even the latest model. Here you can see her, taking away her skin to reveal her AI interior or exterior skeleton. And like even after basically living there with Nathan, she just snaps after Ava telling her something and aids with her escape, even though she has no real motivation to do that. She's a machine. And we don't really have a journey with her developing consciousness. In actuality, the entirety of the movie, she's completely subservient to Nathan, and pretty much seems like obedient robot that you would have in your kitchen. Like we understand why Ava's doing it; she's trying to escape, but why? Why is Kyoko? So that was an issue. It wasn't, I think, explained further. Explained enough, at least to my liking. But moving away from that, and I think the most important part at the end is that we can. This is, by the way, the scene that I was talking about as Nathan tries to stop Ava. Moving towards the end, as the power goes out, the doors actually shut. It is reprogrammed, because Caleb wants to stop Ava after witnessing on the cameras that she actually killed Nathan. But then the power goes out and Ava is free. And I'm actually not sure if Caleb did try to close the doors. That is not shown there. But either way, like somehow he gets trapped in a room, right? So maybe I'm just imagining him trying to stop Ava. But either way, he's stuck in a room. Ava goes past, and he knocks on the door like, let me out, I'm trapped. And Ava doesn't help him. She just looks at him, looks back, dons goes to the closet full of dead AIs and takes their arms that have actual real skin and puts them on herself. So now she doesn't look like a robot, but she looks like an actual real person with like skin and everything. And she puts on a dress and she walks out without helping, without even stopping for Caleb, essentially. And then another interesting little thing that I didn't really buy was that she actually reached the helicopter that brought Gorgeous house. Yes, that's where Nathan lives. That's where this takes place, or the upper floor. Most of the story actually takes place at the basement level. But yes, hi Clara Lauritsen. Glad you had the time to join us. What was I talking about? Yes, she managed to reach the helicopter when it landed, where it delivered Caleb at the beginning of the movie, and she managed to hop onto it and go away. And it was just like a short scene of her leaving and like discovering the nature and everything, and then hopping on the helicopter and going out. Which, I mean, like, thinking about it, it's a cool shot and everything, cool scene, but thinking about it realistically, like, this is a helicopter guy that brought in this random Caleb person, and he just picks up a woman that he's never seen before in his life and takes her away, like, immediately. That's a little strange. What you see on the screen right now to the left, by the way, that's Alvarez is the name? Sorry, I need to check just to make sure. No, Alex Garland. Sorry, Alex Garland. This is Alex Garland there to the left. He's the writer and director of this movie. So yeah, so that's like the last thing that I wasn't so sure of. But moving to the evaluation. As you may have guessed throughout this analysis, I did enjoy the movie. It was a brilliant film. that makes you think about the AI in the future, as well as the consciousness of humankind as a whole. Sorry I've joined late. What is the connection between Stanford Experiment and Ex Machina? There isn't, actually. It's just two completely different movies. I reviewed Stanford Prison Experiment yesterday, and I wanted to review a completely different movie. This is Alicia Vikander, by the way. I wanted to review a completely different movie, Ex Machina, but I didn't feel like I had enough energy to do so, so I rather left it for today. So no, there isn't any connection. I just like these. I liked these two movies and I wanted to review them. There are some cliches here and there in the movie, I felt like. So with the AI and everything going rogue, it's kind of a classic trope, but these cliches I think are so small in comparison, and it's overall such an original movie that is, I feel, really worth watching and rewatching multiple times. You know, that talks about human consciousness. There's this quote from Oppenheimer. There's an interesting anecdote with Mary in the black and white house. It's very similar to Plato's cave, by the way. It's another philosophical question that, you know, it is very interesting. I don't want to get into it now because it's long and winded, and it would pull us to a completely different tangent that I don't really want to explore right now. So there are these motifs all around, deep characteristics of all the characters in it. Like, all in all, there are 4 characters. There's Caleb, Nathan, Kyoko, the Asian AI, and Ava, and that's it. You know, those are the characters. Then you have, of course, like the helicopter pilot and some people in the office at the beginning, but those are basically like pretty much extras. You know, it's only 4 characters. It's an independent movie, and it's absolutely amazing what they managed to do with so many layers to it. There's depth, there's understanding of humanity and you know, human consciousness and the human experience that posits so many questions, and it's something that we can talk about for so long. And if you want to talk about it more and feel like, you know, you didn't think of a question right now as we're reviewing it, make sure to check out my Discord. You'll see it below. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will see it in the description. If you're watching it live, then obviously it's in the About page, Discord, or you can use the command !Discord, and it should show up. Clara Lauritsen, by the way, if you're still watching, if you type in the chat !Discord, it should you know, show you through to our Discord channel. No space, just !Discord if you're interested. But we are moving away finally. No, ! And then we write Discord. DISCORD. !Discord. DISCORD. Yeah, it worked. It worked. I added a little bit of a custom message to guide you through. So I'm glad that the commands work. And anyway, moving to my main question, and something that I've been thinking about for literally days. Did Ava, in fact, have independent consciousness? Did she really have emotions? Or was this just a story about a machine that, through its extensive search and through the powers of like a processor that can make it so lifelike to fool human beings, only solved a complex issue? Because if you look at it, we know from Nathan that she was programmed to seek escape. Nathan literally uses the analogy of Ava being a rat in a maze, and her only goal is to escape. So you have an AI that's sort of in an impregnable fortress in the underground, and it seeks an escape. It's been programmed to seek escape. And knowing that it cannot do that with her powers, the only thing that she can do is like power outages and try to get out during the power is out. And she does that, by the way, even before it becomes necessary for Caleb and Ava to have clandestine conversations or conversations in private. She still does that. She still, causes all these power outages to be able to escape. But it doesn't work. So she needs to find a different solution. And a different solution is presented to her with Caleb. And it is possible. And in my opinion, this is like the main question of the entire movie. It is possible that even though we were kind of led down the path of her developing consciousness and her falling in love and Caleb falling in love, that it was just her pretending, because her machine brain, her processor established that emotionally manipulating Caleb was its best course of action, and it would give her the largest possibility of actual escape. So very easily, even though we talk about it and think about this movie as about an AI who develops human consciousness, we can just as easily think that this was only an AI who solved a complex issue in such a way that it was capable of fooling a human being into believing that it's not only conscious, but completely like humans. And therefore, getting protective over them and trying to save them. Because, like, what leads you down this path is that Ava doesn't show any kind of emotion towards Caleb when she's escaped, and she leaves him there trapped. So that immediately, like, makes you think, like, like, so she wasn't really feeling anything for him. So that is the question that I pose to you, and that you can think about just as I will think about. Did Ava really possess consciousness? And interesting questions that I will very happily hear your opinions on the Discord, in the comments or in the chat right now.